Courage. Introduction. Fear grows stronger when we avoid or deny it, but it begins to dissolve when we turn our attention directly to what makes us most uncomfortable. Fear thrives in the dark, where awareness has yet to shine. When you examine your fear closely, two things often occur. First, the fear itself starts to lessen. Second, you usually realize that its root is different from what you originally believed. Clarity comes when we become precise about our fears and the narratives surrounding them. As with any challenge, understanding is the most powerful remedy. With knowledge, you recognize that you are capable, you are larger than your fear. This realization fosters courage, which is not the absence of fear but the strength to move forward despite it. True fearlessness isn't about never feeling afraid. It's about allowing fear to exist without letting it control you. Courage is demonstrated through how much vulnerability, uncertainty, and resistance we can overcome when we're scared. Even in times of overwhelming fear, bombarded by misinformation and threats to personal and planetary well-being, cultivating a wise relationship with fear is essential. Whether fear creeps in or dominates, it's vital to observe your own negativity, biases, and the temptation to give in to fear-based thinking, which can become self-fulfilling. Also, consider your fear of personal freedom and the responsibilities that come with it, especially the vulnerability of opening your heart to others. Sometimes, the scariest choice is to allow ourselves to connect deeply and authentically. End of introduction. Courage by Ralph Waldo Emerson. I observe that there are three qualities which conspicuously attract the wonder and reverence of mankind. 1. Disinterestedness, as shown in indifference to the ordinary bribes and influences of conduct. A purpose so sincere and generous that it cannot be tempted aside by any prospects of wealth or other private advantage. Self-love is, in almost all men, such an overweight that they are incredulous of a man's habitual preference of the general good to his own. But when they see it proved by sacrifices of ease, wealth, rank, and of life itself, there is no limit to their admiration. This has made the power of the saints of the East and West, who have led the religion of great nations. Self-sacrifice is the real miracle out of which all the reported miracles grew. This makes the renown of the heroes of Greece and Rome, of Socrates, Aristides, and Phocion, of Quintus Curtius, Cato, and Regulus, of Haytham Tye's hospitality, of Chatham, whose scornful magnanimity gave him immense popularity, of Washington, giving his service to the public without salary or reward. 2. Practical power. Men admire the man who can organize their wishes and thoughts in stone and wood and steel and brass, man who can build the boat, who has the impiety to make the rivers run the way he wants them, who can lead his telegraph through the ocean from shore to shore, who, sitting in his closet, can lay out the plans of a campaign, sea war and land war, such that the best generals and admirals, when all is done, see that they must thank him for success, the power of better combination and foresight. However exhibited, whether it only plays a game of chess, or whether, more loftily, a cunning mathematician, penetrating the cubic weights of stars, predicts the planet which eyes had never seen, or whether, exploring the chemical elements whereof we in the world are made, and seeing their secret, Franklin draws off the lightning in his hand, suggesting that one day a wiser geology shall make the earthquake harmless and the volcano an agricultural resource. Or here is one who, seeing the wishes of men, knows how to come at their end, whispers to this friend, argues down that adversary, molds society to his purpose, and looks at all men as wax for his hands, takes command of them as the wind does of clouds, as the mother does of the child, or the man that knows more does of the man that knows less, and leads them in glad surprise to the very point where they would be. This man is followed with acclamation. 3. The third excellence is courage, the perfect will which no terrors can shake, which is attracted by frowns or threats or hostile armies, nay, needs these to awake and fan its reserved energies into a pure flame, and is never quite itself until the hazard is extreme. Then it is serene and fertile, and all its powers play well. There is a Hercules, an Achilles, a Rustum, an Arthur or a Cid in the mythology of every nation, and in authentic history, a Leonidas, a Scipio, a Caesar, a Richard Kerr, the Lion, a Cromwell, a Nelson, a Great Condé, a Bertrand du Guesclin, a Doge Dandolo, a Napoleon, a Messina, and nay. T is said courage is common, but 7. The immense esteem in which it is held proves it to be rare. Animal resistance, the instinct of the male animal when cornered, is no doubt common, but the pure article, courage with eyes, courage with conduct, self-possession at the cannon's mouth, cheerfulness and lonely adherence to the right, is the endowment of elevated characters. I need not show how much it is esteemed, for the people give it the first rank. They forgive everything to it. What an ado we make through 2,000 years about Thermopylae and salamis. What a memory of Poitiers and Crécy and Bunker Hill and Washington's endurance. And any man who puts his life in peril in a cause which is esteemed becomes the darling of all men. The very nursery books, the ballads which delight boys, the romances which delight men, the favorite topics of eloquence, the thunderous emphasis which orators give to every martial defiance and passage of arms, in which the people greet, may testify. How short a time since this whole nation rose every morning to read, or to hear the traits of courage of its sons and brothers in the field, and was never weary of the theme. We have had examples of men who, for showing effective courage on a single occasion, have become a favorite spectacle to nations, and must be brought in chariots to every mass meeting. Men are so charmed with valor that they have pleasured themselves with being called lions, leopards, eagles, and dragons from the animals contemporary with us in the geologic formations. But the animals have a great advantage of us in precocity. Touch the snapping turtle with a stick, and he seizes it with his teeth. Cut off his head, and the teeth will not let go of the stick. Break the egg of the young, and the little embryo, before yet the eyes are open, bites fiercely. These vivacious creatures contriving, shall we say, not only to bite after they are dead, but also to bite before they are born. But man begins life helpless. The baby is in paroxysms of fear the moment its nurse leaves it alone, and it comes so slowly to any power of self-protection that mothers say the salvation of the life and health of a young child is a perpetual miracle. The terrors of the child are quite reasonable and add to his loveliness, for his utter ignorance and weakness, and his enchanting indignation on such a small basis of capital compel every bystander to take his part. Every moment as long as he is awake, he studies the use of his eyes, ears, hands, and feet, learning how to meet and avoid his dangers, and thus every hour loses one terror more. But this education stops too soon. A large majority of men being bred in families and beginning early to be occupied day by day with some routine of safe industry never come to the rough experiences that make the Indian, the soldier, or the frontiersman self-subsistent and fearless. Hence, the high price of courage indicates the general timidity. Mankind, said Franklin, are dastardly when they meet with opposition. In war, even generals are seldom found eager to give battle. Lord Wellington said, uniforms were often masks. And again, when my journal appears, many statues must come down. The Norse sagas relate that when Bishop Magna reproved King Sigurd for his wicked divorce, the priest who attended the bishop, expecting every moment when the savage king would burst with rage and slay his superior, said that he saw the sky no bigger than a calfskin. And I remember when a pair of Irish girls who had been run away in a wagon by a skittish horse said that when he began to rear, they were so frightened that they could not see the horse. Cowardice shuts the eyes till the sky is not larger than a calfskin, shuts the eyes so that we cannot see the horse that is running away with us. Worse, shuts the eyes of the mind and chills the heart. Fear is cruel and mean. The political reigns of terror have been reigns of madness and malignity, a total perversion of opinion. Society is upside down, and its best men are thought too bad to live. Then the protection which a house, a family, neighborhood, and property, even the first accumulation of savings gives, go in all times to generate this taint of the respectable classes. Those political parties which gather in the well-disposed portion of the community, how infirm and ignoble! What white lips they have! Always on the defensive, as if the lead were entrusted to the journals, often written in great part by women and boys who, without strength, wish to keep up the appearance of strength. They can do the hurrahs, the placarding, the flags, and the voting if it is a fair day, but the aggressive attitude of men who will have right done will no longer be bothered with burglars and ruffians in the streets, counterfeiters in public offices, and thieves on the bench. That part, the part of the leader and soul of the Vigilance Committee, must be taken by stout and sincere men who are really angry and determined. In ordinary, we have a snappish criticism which watches and contradicts the opposite party. We want the will which advances and dictates. When we get an advantage, as in Congress the other day, it is because our adversary has committed a fault, not that we have taken the initiative and given the law. Nature has made up her mind that what cannot defend itself shall not be defended. Complaining never so loud and with never so much reason is of no use. One heard many can of peace parties long ago in Kansas and elsewhere that their strength lay in the greatness of their wrongs and dissuading all resistance, as if to make this strength greater. But were their wrongs greater than the Negroes? And what kind of strength did they ever give him? It was always an invitation to the tyrant, and bred disgust in those who would protect the victim. What cannot stand must fall, and the measure of our sincerity and therefore of the respect of men is the amount of health and wealth we will hazard in the defense of our right. An old farmer, my neighbor across the fence, when I ask him if he is not going to town meeting, says, "No. Tea is no use balloting, for it will not stay, but what you do with the gun will stay so." Nature has charged every one with his own defense as with his own support, and the only title I can have to your help is when I have manfully put forth all the means I possess to keep me, and being overborne by odds. The bystanders have a natural wish to interfere and see fair play. But with this specific education, we have no readiness for bad times. I am much mistaken if every man who went to the army in the late war had not a lively curiosity to know how he should behave in action. Tender, amiable boys who had never encountered any rougher play than a baseball match or a fishing excursion were suddenly drawn up to face a bayonet charge or capture a battery. Of course, they must each go into that action with a certain despair. Each whispers to himself, "My exertions must be of small account to the result. Only will the benignant heavens save me from disgracing myself and my friends and my state. Die? Oh yes, I can well die, but I cannot afford to misbehave, and I do not know how I shall feel." So great a soldier as the old French Marshal Montluc acknowledges that he has often trembled with fear and recovered courage when he had said a prayer for the occasion. I knew a young soldier who died in the early campaign who confided to his sister that he had made up his mind to volunteer for the war. "I have not," he said, "any proper courage, but I shall never let anyone find it out." And he had accustomed himself always to go into whatever place of danger and do whatever he was afraid to do, setting a dogged resolution to resist this natural infirmity. Coleridge has preserved an anecdote of an officer in the British Navy who told him that when he, in his first boat expedition, a midshipman in his 14th year, accompanied Sir Alexander Ball, as we were rowing up to the vessel we were to attack. Amid a discharge of musketry, I was overpowered with fear. My knees shook and I was ready to faint away. Lieutenant Ball, seeing me, placed himself close beside me, took hold of my hand and whispered, "Courage, my dear boy. You will recover in a minute or so. I was just the same when I first went out in this way." It was as if an angel spoke to me. From that moment, I was as fearless and as forward as the oldest of the boat's crew. But I dare not think what would have become of me if, at that moment, he had scoffed and exposed me. Knowledge is the antidote to fear. Knowledge, use and reason with the tirades. The child is as much in danger from a staircase or the fire grate or a bathtub or a cat as the soldier from a cannon or an ambush. Each surmounts the fear as fast as he precisely understands the peril and learns the means of resistance. Each is liable to panic, which is, exactly, the terror of ignorance surrendered to the imagination. Knowledge is the encourager, knowledge that takes fear out of the heart, knowledge in use, which is knowledge in practice. They can conquer who believe they can. It is he who has done the deed once who does not shrink from attempting it again. It is the groom who knows the jumping horse well who can safely ride him. It is the veteran soldier who, seeing the flash of the cannon, can step aside from the path of the ball. Use makes a better soldier than the most urgent considerations of duty, familiarity with danger enabling him to estimate the danger. He sees how much is the risk and is not afflicted with imagination, knows practically Marshal Saxe's rule, that every soldier killed costs the enemy his weight in lead. The sailor loses fear as fast as he acquires command of sails and spars and steam. The frontiersman, when he has a perfect rifle and has acquired a sure aim. To the sailor's experience, every new circumstance suggests what he must do. The terrific chances which make the hours and the minutes long to the passenger, he whiles away by incessant application of expedients and repairs. To him a leak, A hurricane or a waterspout is so much work, no more. The hunter is not alarmed by bears, catamounts, or wolves, nor the grazier by his bull, nor the dog breeder by his bloodhound, nor an Arab by the Samoan, nor a farmer by a fire in the woods. The forest on fire looks discouraging enough to a citizen. The farmer is skillful to fight it. The neighbors run together. With pine boughs, they can mop out the flame, and by raking with the hoe a long but little trench, confined to a patch the fire which would easily spread over 100 acres. In short, courage consists in equality to the problem before us. The schoolboy is daunted before his tutor by a question of arithmetic because he does not yet command the simple steps of the solution which the boy beside him has mastered. These once seen, he is as cool as Archimedes and cheerily proceeds a step farther. Courage is equality to the problem in affairs, in science, in trade, in counsel, or in action, consists in the conviction that the agents with whom you contend are not superior in strength of resources or spirit to you. The general must stimulate the mind of his soldiers to the perception that they are men and the enemy is no more. Knowledge, yes, for the danger of dangers is illusion. The eye is easily daunted, and the drums, flags, shining helmets, beard and mustache of the soldier have conquered you long before his sword or bayonet reaches you. But we do not exhaust the subject in the slight analysis. We must not forget the variety of temperaments, each of which qualifies this power of resistance. It is observed that men with little imagination are less fearful. They wait till they feel pain, whilst others of more sensibility anticipate it, and suffer in the fear of the pang more acutely than in the pang. T is certain that the threat is sometimes more formidable than the stroke, and T is possible that the beholders suffer more keenly than the victims. Bodily pain is superficial, seated usually in the skin and the extremities, for the sake of giving us warning to put us on our guard, not in the vitals, where the rupture that produces death is perhaps not felt, and the victim never knew what hurt him. Pain is superficial, and therefore fear is. The torments of martyrdoms are probably most keenly felt by the bystanders. The torments are illusory. The first suffering is the last suffering. The later hurts being lost on insensibility. Our affections and wishes for the external welfare of the hero tumultuously rush to expression in tears and outcries. But we, like him, subside into indifferency and defiance when we perceive how short is the longest arm of malice, how serene is the sufferer. It is plain that there is no separate essence called courage, no cup or cell in the brain, no vessel in the heart containing drops or atoms that make or give this virtue, but it is the right or healthy state of every man, when he is free to do that which is constitutional to him to do. It is directness, the instant performing of that which he ought. The thoughtful man says, "You differ from me in opinion and methods. But do you not see that I cannot think or act otherwise than I do? That my way of living is organic? And to be really strong, we must adhere to our own means. On organic action, all strength depends. Hear what women say of doing a task by sheer force of will. It costs them a fit of sickness. Plutarch relates that the Pythoness who tried to prophesy without command in the temple at Delphi, though she performed the usual rites and inhaled the air of the cavern standing on the tripod, fell into convulsions and died. Undoubtedly, there is a temperamental courage, a warlike blood, which loves a fight, does not feel itself except in a quarrel, as one sees in wasps or ants or cocks or cats. The like vein appears in certain races of men and in individuals of every race. In every school there are certain fighting boys. In every society, the contradicting men. In every town, bravos and bullies, better or worse dressed, fancy men, patrons of the cockpit and the ring. Courage is temperamental, scientific, ideal. Swedenborg has left this record of his king, Charles XII, of Sweden, did not know what that was which others called fear, nor what that spurious valor and daring that is excited by inebriating draughts, for he never tasted any liquid but pure water. Of him we may say that he led a life more remote from death, and in fact lived more than any other man. It was told of the Prince of Condé that there not being a more furious man in the world, danger in fight never disturbs him more than just to make him civil, and to command in words of great obligation to his officers and men, and without any the least disturbance to his judgment or spirit. Each has his own courage as his own talent, but the courage of the tiger is one, and of the horse another. The dog that scorns to fight will fight for his master. The llama that will carry a load if you caress him will refuse food and die if he is scourged. The fury of onset is one, and of calm endurance another. There is a courage of the cabinet as well as a courage of the field, a courage of manners in private assemblies and another in public assemblies, a courage which enables one man to speak masterly to a hostile company, whilst another man who can easily face a cannon's mouth dares not open his own. There is a courage of a merchant in dealing with his trade, by which dangerous turns of affairs are met and prevailed over. Merchants recognize as much gallantry, well judged too, in the conduct of a wise and upright man of business in difficult times, as soldiers in a soldier. There is a courage in the treatment of every art by a master in architecture, in sculpture, in painting, or in poetry, each cheering the mind of the spectator or receiver as by true strokes of genius, which yet nowise implies the presence of physical valor in the artist. This is the courage of genius in every kind. A certain quantity of power belongs to a certain quantity of faculty. The beautiful voice at church goes on and covers up in its volume, as in a cloak, all the defects of the choir. The singers, I observe, all yield to it, and so the fair singer indulges her instinct, and dares, because she knows she can. It gives the cutting edge to every profession. The judge puts his mind to the tangle of contradictions in the case, squarely accosts the question, and by not being afraid of it, by dealing with it as business which must be disposed of, he sees presently that common arithmetic and common methods apply to this affair. Perseverance strips it of all peculiarity and ranges it on the same ground as other businesses. Morphy played a daring game in chess. The daring was only an illusion of the spectator, for the player sees his move to be well fortified and safe. You may see the same dealing in criticism. A new book astonishes for a few days, takes itself out of common jurisdiction, and nobody knows what to say of it. But the scholar is not deceived. The old principles which books exist to express are more beautiful than any book, and out of love of the reality he is an expert judge how far the book has approached it and where it has come short. In all applications it is the same power, the habit of reference to one's own mind, as the home of all truth and counsel, and which can easily dispose of any book because it can very well do without all books. When a confident man comes into a company magnifying this or that author he has freshly read, the company grows silent and ashamed of their ignorance. But I remember the old professor whose searching mind engraved every word he spoke on the memory of the class. When we asked if he had read this or that shining novelty, "No, I have never read that book," instantly the book lost credit and was not to be heard of again. Every creature has a courage of his constitution fit for his duties. Archimedes, the courage of a geometer to stick to his diagram, heedless of the siege and sack of the city, and the Roman soldier his faculty to strike at Archimedes. Each is strong, relying on his own, and each is betrayed when he seeks in himself the courage of others. Captain John Brown, the hero of Kansas, said to me in conversation that for a settler in a new country, one good, believing, strong-minded man is worth 100, nay, 1,000 men without character, and that the right men will give a permanent direction to the fortunes of a state. As for the bullying drunkards of which armies are usually made up, he thought cholera, smallpox, and consumption as valuable recruits. He held the belief that courage and chastity are silent concerning themselves. He said, "As soon as I hear one of my men say, 'Ah, let me only get my eye on such a man, I'll bring him down,' I don't expect much aid in the fight from that talker." T is the quiet, peaceable men, the men of principle, that make the best soldiers. T is still observed that those men most valiant are who are most modest when they come to war. True courage is not ostentatious. Men who wish to inspire terror seem thereby to confess themselves cowards. Why do they rely on it? But because they know how potent it is with themselves. The true temper has genial influences. It makes a bond of union between enemies. Governor Wise of Virginia, in the record of his first interviews with his prisoner, appeared to great advantage. If Governor Wise is a superior man, or inasmuch as he is a superior man, he distinguishes John Brown. As they confer, they understand each other swiftly, each respects the other. If opportunity allowed, they would prefer each other's society and desert their former companions. Enemies would become affectionate. Hector and Achilles, Richard and Saladin, Wellington and Soult, General Damas and Abdelkader, become aware that they are nearer and more alike than any other two, and, if their nation and circumstance did not keep them apart, would run into each other's arms. See too what good contagion belongs to it. Everywhere it finds its own with magnetic affinity. Courage of the soldier awakens the courage of the woman. Florence Nightingale brings Lent and the blessing of her shadow. Heroic women offer themselves as nurses of the brave veteran. The troop of Virginia infantry that had marched to guard the prison of John Brown asked leave to pay their respects to the prisoner. Poetry and eloquence catch the hint and soar to a pitch unknown before. Everything feels the new breath except the old doting nigh-dead politicians, whose heart the trumpet of resurrection could not wake. The charm of the best courage is that they are inventions, inspirations, flashes of genius. The hero could not have done the feat at another hour, in a lower mood. The best act of the marvelous genius of Greece was its first act, not in the statue or the Parthenon, but in the instinct which, at Thermopylae, held Asia at bay, kept Asia out of Europe, Asia with its antiquities and organic slavery, from corrupting the hope and new morning of the West. The statue, the architecture, were the later and inferior creation of the same genius. In View of this moment of history, we recognize a certain prophetic instinct better than wisdom. Napoleon said well, "My hand is immediately connected with my head, but the sacred courage is connected with the heart. The head is a half, a fraction, until it is enlarged and inspired by the moral sentiment. For it is not the means on which we draw, as health or wealth, practical skill or dexterous talent, or multitudes of followers, that count, but the aims only. The aim reacts back on the means. A great aim aggrandizes the means. The meal and water that are the commissariat of the forlorn hope that stake their lives to defend the pass are sacred as the Holy Grail, or as if one had eyes to see in chemistry the fuel that is rushing to feed the sun. There is a persuasion in the soul of man that he is here for cause, that he was put down in this place by the Creator to do the work for which he inspires him, that thus he is an overmatch for all antagonists that could combine against him. The pious Mrs. Hutchinson says of some passages in the defense of Nottingham against the Cavaliers, "It was a great instruction that the best and highest courageous are beams of the Almighty." And whenever the religious sentiment is adequately affirmed, it must be with dazzling courage. As long as it is cowardly insinuated, as with the wish to succor some partial and temporary interest, or to make it affirm some pragmatic tenet which our parish church receives today, it is not imparted and cannot inspire or create. For it is always new, leads in surprises, and practice never comes up with it. There are ever appearing men who, almost as soon as they are born, take a beeline to the rack of the inquisitor, the axe of the tyrant, like Giordano Bruno, Vanini, Huss, Paul, Jesus, and Socrates. Look at Fox's Lives of the Martyrs, Sewell's History of the Quakers, Southey's Book of the Church, at the folios of the brothers Bolandi, who collected the lives of 25,000 martyrs, confessors, ascetics, and self-tormentors. There is much of fable, but a broad basis of fact. The tender skin does not shrink from bayonets. The timid woman is not scared by faggots. The rack is not frightful, nor the rope ignominious. The poor Puritan, Anthony Parsons, at the stake, tied a straw on his head when the fire approached him, and said, "This is God's hat." Sacred courage indicates that a man loves an idea better than all things in the world, that he is aiming neither at self nor comfort, but will venture all to put in act the invisible thought in his mind. He is everywhere a liberator, but of a freedom that is ideal, not seeking to have land or money or conveniences, but to have no other limitation than that which his own constitution imposes. He is free to speak the truth. He is not free to lie. He wishes to break every yoke all over the world which hinders his brother from acting after his thought. World which hinders his brother from acting after his thought. There are degrees of courage, and each step upward makes us acquainted with a higher virtue. Let us say then frankly that the education of the will is the object of our existence. Poverty, the prison, the rack, the fire, the hatred and execrations of our fellow men appear trials beyond the endurance of common humanity, but to the hero whose intellect is aggrandized by the soul, and so measures these penalties against the good which his thought surveys, these terrors vanish as darkness at sunrise. We have little right in piping times of peace to pronounce on these rare heights of character, but there is no assurance of security. In most private lives, difficult duty is never far off. Therefore, we must think with courage. Scholars and thinkers are prone to an effeminate habit and shrink if a coarser shout comes up from the street or a brutal act is recorded in the journals. The medical college piles up in its museum its grim monsters of morbid anatomy, and there are melancholy skeptics with a taste for carrion who batten on the hideous facts in history, persecutions, inquisitions, St. Bartholomew massacres, devilish lives, Nero, Caesar Borgia, Marat, Lopez, men in whom every ray of humanity was extinguished, parricides, matricides, and whatever moral monsters. These are not cheerful facts, but they do not disturb a healthy mind. They require patience as robust as the energy that attacks us, and an unresting exploration of final causes. Wolf, snake, and crocodile are not inharmonious in nature, but are made useful as checks, scavengers, and pioneers, and we must have a scope as large as nature's to deal with beasts like men, detect what scullion function is assigned them, and foresee in the secular amelioration of the planet how these will become unnecessary and will die out. He has not learned the lesson of life who does not every day surmount a fear. I do not wish to put myself or any man into a theatrical position, or urge him to ape the courage of his comrade. Have the courage not to adopt another's courage. There is scope and cause and resistance enough for us in our proper work and circumstance. And there is no creed of an honest man, be he Christian, Turk, or Gentoo, which does not equally preach it. If you have no faith in beneficent power above you, but see only an adamant fate coiling its folds about nature and man, then reflect that the best use of fate is to teach us courage, if only because baseness cannot change the appointed event. If you accept your thoughts as inspirations from the Supreme Intelligence, obey them when they prescribe difficult duties, because they come only so long as they are used. Or, if your skepticism reaches to the last verge, and you have no confidence in any foreign mind, then be brave, because there is one good opinion which must always be of consequence to you, namely, your own. End of courage. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and share. Your support is our motivation to keep creating more content.